The sky over Rabaul is burning. 6 Mitsubishi Zeros spiral down through the smoke like predators circling wounded prey. Below them, a single F6F Hellcat banks hard, engine screaming, pilot wrestling the stick with both hands. The Zeros are lighter, faster, more agile. Everyone knows that. The manuals say don't dogfight them. The briefings repeat it like gospel, but Lieutenant Commander Edward O'Hare is not following the manual. He is turning inside them, one by one. February 1943. The Solomon Islands are a graveyard of aircraft carriers and burning coral reefs. The air war in the Pacific is still a question mark written in aluminum and blood. Japanese fighters own the turning radius. American planes own the firepower. But firepower means nothing if you cannot line up the shot. The Grumman F6F Hellcat entered service only months ago. It is heavier than the Zero by more than 2,000 pounds, slower in the climb, wider in the turn. Pilots transitioning from the nimble F4F Wildcat feel like they are flying a freight train. Some call it a tank with wings. Others say it is too stable, too forgiving, too slow to win a knife fight. But it has 6 .50-caliber machine guns, armor plating behind the seat, self-sealing fuel tanks. It can take punishment the Zero cannot dream of surviving. The question is whether it can deliver punishment before the Zero slips away. At Henderson Field on Guadalcanal, the mood is tense. The airstrip is a scar of dirt and crushed coral, carved from jungle and shelled nightly by Japanese destroyers. Mechanics work under camouflage netting. Pilots sleep in muddy tents, their flight suits stiff with salt and sweat. The smell of aviation fuel mixes with rotting vegetation and the metallic tang of spent brass. Intelligence reports say Rabaul is being reinforced. Rabaul is the keystone of Japanese air power in the South Pacific. Hundreds of aircraft, thousands of troops, a fortress carved into volcanic ridges and hidden under jungle canopy. To strike it is to fly into a hornet's nest with no backup and no margin for error. The mission brief is simple: escort the bombers, keep the Zeros off their backs, get home alive. Edward O'Hare listens without expression. He is 28 years old, lean, quiet. His face is sunburned and unreadable. He does not boast. He does not joke. He listens to the weather report, the fuel calculations, the estimated enemy strength. Then he walks to his Hellcat and begins his pre-flight check. The other pilots watch him, some with respect, some with doubt. O'Hare earned the Medal of Honor a year earlier for single-handedly attacking 9 Japanese bombers threatening the carrier Lexington. He shot down 5, damaged 3 more. Saved the ship. But that was in a Wildcat. That was desperation. This is doctrine. This is formation flying. This is survival by the numbers. The Hellcat is controversial. Some veterans say it is too cautious, too designed by committee. It does not inspire love. It inspires arguments. But O'Hare has been flying it for weeks now. He has been studying it, testing it, feeling the edges of what it can and cannot do. He does not talk about what he has learned. He simply climbs into the cockpit, straps in, and starts the engine. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 roars to life, 18 cylinders of American engineering shaking the airframe like a controlled explosion. The sky is hazy, the air is thick and wet. The formation climbs, slowly, heavy with fuel and ammunition. Below them, the ocean is a sheet of gray-blue glass. Ahead, clouds stack like distant mountains. Somewhere beyond those clouds, Rabaul waits. If this history matters to you, tap like and subscribe. Edward Henry O'Hare was born in St. Louis, Missouri, in March 1914. His father was a lawyer with connections to organized crime. His mother was devout, disciplined, and determined that her son would grow up honest. The house was full of contradictions, wealth and danger, ambition and faith. Edward was quiet as a child, not shy, just observant. He watched people. He listened more than he spoke. He had a mechanical mind. He liked puzzles. He liked systems. He liked understanding how things worked and why they failed. When he was a teenager, his father turned informant against Al Capone. The family knew what that meant. A week before the trial, Edward's father was found shot to death in his car. The case was never solved. Edward did not talk about it. He carried it. He enrolled at the Naval Academy in Annapolis in 1933. His classmates remembered him as calm under pressure, good with numbers, excellent in navigation, not flashy, not a natural stick-and-rudder man, but steady, reliable, the kind of pilot who thought 3 steps ahead. He earned his wings in 1940. By the time Pearl Harbor was attacked, he was a seasoned carrier pilot with hundreds of hours in the cockpit. He understood fuel consumption. He understood deflection angles. He understood that air combat was not about courage. It was about geometry and timing, and knowing your aircraft better than the enemy knew his. When O'Hare transferred to the F6F program in late 1942, he did not complain about its weight or its reputation. He studied it like an engineer. He flew it in every configuration. He tested its stall characteristics. He measured its roll rate at different speeds. He learned where it bled energy and where it held it. Other pilots saw limitations. O'Hare saw parameters. A limitation is a wall. A parameter is a boundary you can work within. The Hellcat could not outturn a Zero in a slow-speed scissors. That was a fact. But it could sustain a high-speed turn without losing energy. It could reverse direction faster in a rolling maneuver. It had better visibility, better radios, better gun sight tracking. It was not more agile. It was more controllable. O'Hare began developing a theory. If you could force the Zero to fight at higher speeds, you could neutralize its turning advantage. If you could use vertical maneuvers instead of horizontal ones, you could leverage the Hellcat's superior power-to-weight ratio in the climb. If you could keep your speed above 250 knots. The Zero's controls stiffened and its magic disappeared. He tested this in mock dogfights against captured Zeros and against his own squadron mates flying Wildcats. He refined his techniques. He did not write a manual, he simply flew. And he remembered. By the time he approached Rabaul in February 1943, Edward O'Hare had flown more hours in the Hellcat than almost any other pilot in the Navy. He knew what it could do. He knew what it could not. And he knew that the men who mocked it had never tested its edges. The raid on Rabaul is a calculated risk. 16 bombers, 8 fighters, hundreds of miles over open ocean, no radar warning, no rescue if you go down. The Japanese know they are coming. Rabaul's early warning network is meticulous. Coast watchers hidden in the jungle have already radioed sightings. By the time the American formation crosses the coast, the Zeros are airborne and climbing. The bombers make their run. Bombs tumble toward fuel dumps and revetments. Anti-aircraft fire fills the sky with black puffs. Then the Zeros arrive. They come in flights of 3 and 4, slashing through the formation with brutal efficiency. The American fighters break to engage. The sky becomes a tangle of contrails and gunfire. O'Hare sees a flight of 6 Zeros climbing toward a straggling bomber. The bomber's tail gun is silent. It is smoking. It is alone. The Zeros are seconds away from tearing it apart. He does not call for backup. There is no time. He shoves the throttle forward and dives. The Hellcat accelerates like a falling anvil. Airspeed climbs past 300 knots. The controls grow heavy but precise. O'Hare lines up on the trailing Zero and opens fire. 6 guns converge. The Zero disintegrates in a spray of metal and fuel. The other 5 break hard. They scatter like birds. Then they regroup. and they turn toward him. 5-1, in a turning fight. Exactly what doctrine says never to do. O'Hare does not run. He pulls the Hellcat into a steep climbing turn. The Zeros follow. They are lighter. They should close the gap. But O'Hare holds his speed. He keeps the turn tight but fast. The Hellcat's big engine howls. The airframe shudders but holds. The Zeros try to cut inside his turn. O'Hare reverses. He rolls inverted and pulls through, converting altitude into airspeed, then snaps back into a climbing spiral. The Zeros follow, but they are slower now. Their speed bled off in the initial turn. They are trying to dogfight at 200 knots. The Hellcat is still above 250. O'Hare comes around again. He fires a burst. A second Zero spins away, trailing smoke. The others tighten their circle. They are experienced pilots. They know what they are doing. But they are chasing a plane that refuses to behave like it is supposed to. The Hellcat should be lumbering. It should be bleeding energy in every turn. It should be a sitting target. But O'Hare is using power and geometry. He is not turning tighter. He is turning faster. He is forcing them to fight his fight. Another Zero pulls lead. O'Hare sees the tracer fire arc past his canopy. He pulls harder, feels the G-forces press him into his seat, and keeps the turn going. The Zero overshoots. O'Hare reverses again. He fires. The Zero's wing crumples. 3 down, 3 still hunting. But now the other American fighters are arriving. The Zeros see the odds shifting. They break off and dive for the cloud cover. O'Hare does not chase. He rejoins the bomber and escorts it home. His wingman arrives. Minutes later, breathless over the radio. He saw the whole thing. 6 Zeros, 4 kills, no hits taken, in a Hellcat, in a turning fight. The debrief is quiet. The intelligence officer asks O'Hare to describe his maneuvers. O'Hare shrugs. He says he kept his speed up. He says he used the engine. He says the Hellcat turns fine if you do not let it slow down. The other pilots exchange glances. Some are skeptical. Some are beginning to believe. The problem is not the aircraft. It is the doctrine. For months, American fighter tactics have been built around one assumption. The Zero outturns everything. Therefore, do not turn with it. Boom and zoom, dive, shoot, climb away. Never commit to a sustained engagement. It is good advice. It saves lives. But it also seeds initiative. It makes every fight reactive, defensive. The Zero dictates the terms. O'Hare knows this. He also knows that tactics written in Florida and California do not always match reality over Rabaul and Truk. The manuals assume you can always dictate the engagement. They assume you have altitude. They assume you have backup. They assume the enemy cooperates. But combat is chaos. Bombers get separated. Wingmen get shot down. You find yourself alone with a crippled B-17 and 6 Zeros closing fast. And in that moment, the manual is useless. O'Hare has been thinking about this since his Medal of Honor mission. He saved the Lexington not by following doctrine but by ignoring it. He attacked head-on. He pressed closer than any manual recommended. He trusted his aircraft and his aim and his nerve. Now he is doing it again. But this time he is not improvising. He is applying principles. He has thought through the physics. He has tested the limits. He has built a mental model of what the Hellcat can do if you stop asking it to be a wildcat or a Zero and let it be itself. After Rabaul, he begins sharing his techniques, not in formal briefings, in casual conversations. He shows younger pilots how to manage energy, how to use the throttle as a weapon, how to read the Zero's nose position and predict the overshoot, how to reverse a turn without bleeding speed. Some listen, some ignore him. The skeptics say he got lucky. They say the Zeros were inexperienced. They say the Hellcat is still too slow. But word spreads. Other pilots try his methods. They report back. The Hellcat turns better than we thought. You can force a Zero into a high-speed fight. You can win if you stay aggressive. The Navy's training command takes notice. They send observers to interview O'Hare. They want to standardize his tactics, turn them into doctrine. O'Hare resists. He says every fight is different. He says you cannot write a manual for chaos. You can only teach principles. He keeps flying. He keeps testing. He keeps surviving. But there is tension in the squadron now. Some of the older pilots resent the attention. They say O'Hare is reckless. They say he is teaching young men to take unnecessary risks. They say dogfighting a Zero is suicide, no matter how good your technique is. O'Hare does not argue. He simply points to the results. His pilots are coming home. The Zeros are not. November 1943. The Gilbert Islands. The Navy is preparing for Operation Galvanic, the invasion of Tarawa. The fleet is the largest yet assembled in the Pacific. Dozens of carriers, thousands of aircraft. The stakes are existential. If the landings fail, the entire offensive stalls. The Japanese know it too. They are throwing everything they have at the fleet. Night torpedo bombers, high-altitude scouts, kamikaze tactics before the word exists. O'Hare is now Air Group Commander aboard the USS Enterprise. He is responsible for coordinating fighter defense. The threats are evolving faster than the tactics. Radar-guided interceptions are still experimental. Night fighting is a black art. Pilots are exhausted and the tempo is unrelenting. On the night of November 26, radar picks up a formation of Japanese bombers approaching the fleet. O'Hare volunteers to lead a night intercept. It is dangerous work, no horizon, no reference points, just black sky, green radar scopes, and the faint glow of instrument panels. He takes off with 2 wingmen. The bombers are somewhere ahead, low and fast. The radar controller vectors them in. O'Hare flies by instinct and instrument. The Hellcat's cockpit is cramped and dark. The engine's blue exhaust flames flicker just beyond the windscreen. He spots a Betty bomber silhouetted against the clouds. He closes to point-blank range. He fires. The bomber explodes in a flash of orange and white. The blast is so close it rocks his Hellcat. He pulls up and scans for more targets. The radio crackles. Confused voices. Someone is firing. But at what? There is a burst of tracer fire. It crosses in front of O'Hare's nose. Then silence. His wingman calls out. He has lost sight of O'Hare. The controller calls for a position. No response. The radio is silent. Edward O'Hare does not return. For days, search planes comb the ocean. They find nothing. No wreckage, no raft, no body. The official report lists him as missing in action, presumed dead. The cause is unknown. Friendly fire, enemy gunner, mechanical failure. The night keeps its secrets. He was 29 years old. The loss is staggering, not because of what he had done, because of what he was still teaching. His methods were just beginning to spread. His influence was just beginning to reshape fighter tactics across the fleet. But his ideas do not die with him. By mid-1944, the F6F Hellcat is the dominant fighter in the Pacific. It accounts for nearly 75% of the Navy's air-to-air kills. The kill ratio against the Zero is 13-1. Pilots who once mocked it now swear by it. The tactics O'Hare pioneered become standard: high-speed maneuvering, energy management, aggressive reversals. The thatch weave is refined to incorporate his principles. Training syllabi are rewritten. New pilots are taught to respect the Hellcat's strengths instead of mourning its limitations. Squadrons flying his techniques report lower losses and higher kill counts. The Hellcat becomes a symbol, not of brute force, but of intelligent aggression, of learning the rules and finding the exceptions, of knowing your tools and using them with precision. Veterans who flew with O'Hare speak of him with quiet reverence. They do not call him a maverick or a lone wolf. They call him methodical, thoughtful, a pilot who understood the war as a system and found the leverage points. The engineers at Grumman notice they receive feedback from pilots using O'Hare's methods. They refine the Hellcat's control surfaces. They adjust the engine tuning. They build on what he proved in combat. The Hellcat becomes the most produced American fighter of the war, more than 12,000 built, more enemy aircraft destroyed than any other Allied fighter. It is not the fastest, not the most agile, but it is the most effective, and its effectiveness is rooted in the lessons learned by a quiet pilot who refused to accept that a heavier aircraft could not win a turning fight. Historians later credit the Hellcat with shifting the balance of air power in the Pacific. But the aircraft did not do it alone. It was the pilots, the ones who tested the edges, the ones who questioned doctrine, the ones who understood that tactics must evolve as fast as the enemy does. O'Hare's name is given to an airfield outside Chicago. Millions of travelers pass through it every year. Few know the story. Fewer still know that the man it honors died testing the next evolution of tactics, that he did not die in a dogfight. He died in the dark, leading from the front, pushing into uncertainty because someone had to. His Medal of Honor citation mentions his heroism. It does not mention his curiosity, his patience, his willingness to question assumptions and test theories under fire, but those qualities mattered more than any single kill count. There is a photograph of Edward O'Hare taken weeks before his final mission. He is standing beside his Hellcat, arms crossed, flight helmet under one arm. His face is calm. His eyes are tired but clear. He does not smile. He looks like a man who has seen enough to know that survival is not about glory. It is about preparation, precision, and respect for the machine. The men who flew with him remember that look. They say it was the look of someone who knew the risks and calculated them anyway, who did not pretend to be invincible but refused to be paralyzed by fear. The Hellcat outlasted the war. Many were scrapped. Some were sold to foreign militaries. A few survive in museums, polished and placarded, their guns empty and their engines cold. They sit under fluorescent lights, silent and still, while tourists walk past with cameras and children. But in the right light, if you know the story, you can see what O'Hare saw. The wide wings, the sturdy fuselage, the 6 guns waiting in the wings, the controls that respond if you know how to ask. He did not invent the Hellcat. He revealed it. He showed what it could do when flown not with desperation, but with understanding, when treated not as a compromise, but as a tool with its own logic. His legacy is not a list of kills. It is a way of thinking, a refusal to accept received wisdom without testing it, a belief that every problem has edges you can explore and parameters you can exploit. That courage is not recklessness. That aggression is not the opposite of thought. The pilots who survived the war carried those lessons into peacetime. They became test pilots, engineers, instructors. They taught the next generation that doctrine is a starting point, not a conclusion. That the best tactics come from those who fly the aircraft and face the enemy and survive to ask better questions. In the decades after his death, the Navy reviewed O'Hare's combat reports and training recommendations. They became foundational texts in fighter tactics development. His principles were taught at Miramar and Oceana. They influenced jet-age combat. They still echo in the way pilots are trained to think about energy, angles, and decision-making under pressure. Edward O'Hare never wrote a memoir. He left no speeches, no philosophical treatises, just logbook entries, terse after-action reports, and the memories of the men who flew beside him. But those fragments add up to a portrait. A man who understood that the distance between theory and survival is measured in willingness to test, to learn, to adapt. On a clear morning over the Pacific, a Hellcat could hold its own against anything in the sky. Not because it was perfect, because the man in the cockpit understood it, trusted it, and knew that intelligence, applied with courage, could turn a good machine into a great one. That is the lesson. Not that one man can change the war, but that one mind, asking the right questions, can change the way 1,000 others fight it. They mocked the Hellcat. They said it was too slow, too heavy, too forgiving to teach real lessons. But Edward O'Hare took it into combat and came back with answers. He turned doctrine into data. He made the possible larger, and in doing so he gave the pilots who followed him not just tactics, but permission. Permission to trust their judgment, permission to test the limits, permission to survive. That permission saved more lives than any medal ever could. The sky over Rabaul is long silent now. The jungle has reclaimed the airstrips, the wrecks have rusted into red dust. But somewhere in the archives, in the logbooks and the fading reports, Edward O'Hare's handwriting remains. Neat, precise. The handwriting of a man who believed that the answer to fear is not faith, it is preparation, and the answer to impossible odds is not luck, it is understanding. He flew his last mission into darkness. He did not return, but the light he cast still guides.